You don't have to go and research each individual religion to prove its wrongness. You disprove one, you just disprove the idea of a God, and they're all gone. I mean, really, there is no one startlingly unique religion that shines above all others. They're all in a scrum together. They all borrow each other's books and gods, and they're all equally deluded as far as I can tell.
My faith is a personal thing. It's not necessarily based specifically on the Bible. It's based on my understanding of my personal relationship with God and with Jesus.
I do feel faith is a choice. I have a personal relationship or faith in God, and they're somewhat influenced from my childhood upbringing.
My faith gives me... Sometimes it doesn't give me a whole lot. Sometimes it gives me the power to keep on going and trying when I'm most likely to give up or most wanting to give up.
In over 20 years of being a psychologist, one of the things that I've noticed is that for so many people, when we work on very deeply held beliefs that are literal interpretations of whatever religion they're in, the damage is absolutely horrendous, because there is this deep sense of living a life that is just so bad and so wrong, and that a part of who you are, a deep sense of who you are, is just so evil. And the worst thing is that when you love somebody, that love is disordered, that love is putrefied, that love is evil and wrong and will lead to destruction. I can't think of much more that, many more ways you could traumatize someone than for them to go through that.
Yeah, same-sex activity or non-normative heterosexual behaviour is very, very hard for religion to accommodate. In fact, I don't think it really can accommodate it.
Of course, you can be gay and religious, you can be gay and a Christian. And to explain that really is quite simple, because my orientation doesn't automatically make me immoral, promiscuous, or anything else. Like my morality and my faith are choices. My sexual orientation, however, isn't.
There was one particular Anglican priest in Sydney who wrote to me and told me that I was falling into the error of Satan and that I should abandon my partner and throw him out, even though at that stage he'd been putting up with me for 40 years. I told him I certainly didn't intend to do that, and apart from anything else, it had cost me a lot of moolah. And also, it was a very unkind view. It was in my humble opinion, a totally unchristian view of human love and human relationship, and it was just unreal. A person who had blinkers on, who wasn't looking deeply into the essential message of the religion, which is a message of love, reconciliation, and living together, and loving one another.
The one thing through all the trials and problems that I've had in my life that never left me was my faith. I've always seemed to have something that has either kept me going, or I've always felt that I was observed, that I was watched, I was cared about. And it's, whether it be just psychology or whether it be some actual divine being, I don't know, I don't care.
The reason why I still have my faith and I still have my beliefs is because God is my everything. I believe in Him. He's so real to me. He is such a huge part of my life, and for me to ignore Him and for me to pretend He's not there would be almost me living a lie.
It's, I wish this is true. I hope this is true. And my hope and my wish for this to be true is so strong that I believe that it is. But it's all based on wishing and hoping, and not necessarily on reality.
The enemy is not churches, denominations, politicians. The enemy is ignorance.
I mean, I saw a sign today that was talking about faith, and it's, what did it say? Faith is making your soul believe beyond what your eyes can see.
The purpose of this film was simple. It was asking the question, can you be gay and formally religious? It seems simple. During the making of this film, I met with so many people who were tortured by religion. Tortured, they experienced holy horrors like you would not believe. And yet, they came back. It's like an abusive relationship. I know people say that you can be both. I just couldn't understand how.
Since the dawn of consciousness, humans have searched for a belief system. We want to know, how should I live? Why is the world like this? And what happens when I die? Religions give us many answers, an endless number of options, and all are convinced that they alone hold the truth. Why are there so many? And how can they all be right? Fertility goddesses and pagan earth spirits of the Celts, the dreaming of Australian indigenous peoples, a multitude of gods, goddesses and spirits in Chinese and African cultures, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Muslims and Jews. Our faiths tell us who is ascending to everlasting bliss and who's heading south, and it seems the gays are always going down. Human beings live and die at the intersection of sexuality and faith. Let's hear some stories.
I knew I was gay when I was probably around 11 years old. It wasn't something that I pursued or thought about. I kind of put it in the background until later in life. From the church's point of view, that no, it wasn't okay to have these feelings, that they were not acceptable feelings. I don't believe that people in the church think that being gay is wrong. And while the church sees homosexual activity as being wrong, they do not view the person who is gay as being wrong or bad. My nun friends and my brother friends and my family don't see me as being a bad person or a wrong person or my lifestyle as being wrong. There are many different interpretations. It depends on the person who's reading them. It depends on the time in history they were written. Pick a sentence and use that against other people. I don't believe it was the intent of God's inspiring people to write the Old Testament. I can help the church see that they need to look at a whole person, not just one aspect of a person's life. You can have sex without having any emotion whatsoever, but if it is an act of love between two people, then it's an expression of God's love. I'm not asking the church to excuse the sex. I'm not asking them for their opinion at all on it. It is part of who I am. You need to decide if the life that you're living is right or wrong. If you believe that God is judgmental and His goal is to catch people in doing wrong, then perhaps I will end up in hell. I am a very caring, loving person, and God wants those kind of people in the world.
He knows that his God wouldn't make him to be wrong or a freak or something's wrong with him. He has tried to turn it around and reject it and make it a small piece to where he could say it's not important. It is important. It's his life. I know they hate it. I know he can't find any peace that he belongs to. That is
You're
the
wrong.
sin of it. No, as far as the Catholic Church goes.
I belong to the Catholic Church.
I know you do because you choose to, not because they choose to include you.
They don't have a right to choose to include me or exclude me.
In your opinion.
They've never said that.
They have.
They haven't.
Then why can't
They
you
haven't.
marry?
Do you still take communion?
Yes.
He damn sight better because he hasn't sinned against anybody. It couldn't be there without a God saying that it's okay.
I was raised in a believing Anglican household, and when I was younger I thought I was going to become a priest, but then my sexuality sort of interfered with that, and I left that behind, but still had on a sort of weak belief in Christianity. And now I would say, after various movements through my life, I would say I'm an atheist.
Can you say that one more time, please? God doesn't want you to say the word.
Yeah, today I'm an atheist.
One more time.
I'm an atheist. Today I'm an atheist, definitely. I have Vishnu.
One more time.
I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is a God. I don't believe there is a soul. I don't believe there is an afterlife. I don't believe in reincarnation. I think religion will always matter, and there will always be a religious element to human society, because people want to believe that there is more to life than just this existence. I think it's going to be I don't think human society will ever be at a stage where everyone is a rational atheist. I think there will always be that desire for something beyond.
Lord, I want to be more holy in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more holy in my heart, in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more holy in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart.
So my mother and father got married, met each other through Bible college and got married, and then became part of the Pentecostal movement. It was a big movement in the 50s and 60s. So I was actually brought up very, very religious. I attended church twice on Sundays. In my teen years, I attended youth group. There was midweek Bible studies on a Wednesday night. So it was a very active side of my life. I struggled with being gay right throughout my church life, because I had obviously crushes on other men. I had crushes on people within the church, some my own age, some were older than me, leaders within the church. And I really had to really suppress those feelings, because my religious beliefs taught me that it was evil, it was wrong, that homosexuality was not of God, it was of the devil. The faith of a child is incredible. They simply believe and that's it. They don't question it. And because I had probably not a really good relationship with my father, as I should have, I wasn't very close to my father, that I was actually told that, that I needed to, once I get married and have children of my own, that this would in some way overcome these feelings, that I was actually looking for a father image, and someone to replace the relationship or the yearning relationship that I wanted with another man. And as a teenager, I mean, you've got enough problems going through your sexuality and through your hormonal issues and things like that. And here I am dealing also with these feelings of suppressing my feelings towards men as well. And so I overdosed on a number of occasions. There, unfortunately, and I'm ashamed to admit, that I started to live a double life, as many other married men do, where you have sexual experiences with other men. And not relationships, just one-off sexual experiences. And again, I continued the avenue of, you weaken, you have a sexual experience, you feel guilty, you repent, and then you move on. So this cycle was continual, and it becomes very, very draining for you. And so I honestly did go back to the church, and I went through counselling, exorcisms and all sorts of things to try and really make it right, or try every possible avenue to so-called make myself straight. I have a personal relationship or faith in God, and they're somewhat influenced from my childhood upbringing. And I think if your faith starts to go against you as a person, that's where the confusion comes in, because that's where you get suicide and all these attempts, and very confused people, because their insides are saying one thing, but their religious faith is telling them to do something different, and it just causes inner confusion to the individual. The church believes that being gay is a choice. I would rephrase that. To a degree, they are true. Being gay, openly gay, is a choice. And that's where I would change that, because there are gay people in the church, and they're still gay. They're just living the life behind closed doors. They're living these secret lives. I do personally believe that you can be openly gay, and you can have religious beliefs, and that the two can exist. Yes, I do. It's how you practice that faith. Some people practice their faith openly and in open forum, and they attend a church service. It may be on a Sunday. Other people have their own relationship with God, and I believe, your relationship with God is a personal thing. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. It's between you and God. I made the decision, and I'm the happiest person I have ever been in my life now. There are aspects I'm unhappy because I don't, the relationship with my children was broken and affected my wife and her family and my family. Yes, I caused people a lot of pain, and I agree. But I think I would cause, let's admit, I would have caused myself much more pain if I had stayed in that situation. In the community in general, it's the church that has influenced the community that being gay is wrong. It's not society itself. Society in general does accept homosexuality.
I just wanted what everyone else had. I wanted God to love me. I wanted a family. I wanted kids. I wanted to be accepted and loved by the church. I went to a Pentecostal church. This church was very, very full on, very spiritual. If you could change, it would certainly happen there. Miracles would happen. We were told that people would be healed, that people would get up from wheelchairs, that people would change from homosexual to heterosexual, and that we were led to believe that this was a common thing. That it would be so much easier if I was just straight, and wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I'd been a bad person or something to have to carry this. And I just felt isolated and alone, and like I was the only one. You would be grilled almost. You would be told, you need to try harder, you need to keep praying, you need to commit to this more, and almost feeling guilty for something that is such a natural part of you. You can go without pornography, you can go without masturbation, you can go without sexual behaviour, but to actually stop having thoughts about other men is something that I found was impossible to do. I kept with it, and it just kept on getting worse and worse, and got to a point where I remember going to church, and I didn't feel God there. I didn't know what I believed anymore. It was, I couldn't, walk into the church building without crying and without feeling like I was a failure to God. And so I remember one day realizing that maybe, hey, I'm never going to change. And that realization itself of that maybe I'm not going to change was essentially I jumped to, okay, if I'm not going to change, then God's never going to love me, and then I'm bound for hell anyway. And I just can't take it anymore. And, I attempted suicide. I started, really with the self-harm. And, I started cutting my wrists and all these different things. And, I wasn't doing it to get attention or anything like that. I was doing it because I felt like such a failure, like such a mistake to God, that I just, I didn't honestly feel like I deserved any more chances. I remember, crying out to God after the second one in pure desperation, not knowing what I could do. And as weird as it sounds, I felt in that moment that, God did love me, that God had a plan and purpose for my life, and that being gay was okay. This God of love surely can't want me hating myself, and surely can't want me wanting to kill myself. And so I think, that knowledge and that realization, really changed everything for me. Yes, I do feel that you can be a gay person and also be strong in your Christian faith at the same time. Once you realize, or once you come to the belief, like I did, that homosexuality is just another part of God's plan, and you accept yourself as you are, then you really are just allowed to get on with your life. You're allowed to really follow the Bible like anybody else. I think gay and lesbian people have a lot to teach the church. From the coming out process as a whole can be very hard. The feelings of isolation, feelings like a minority. If you look at the Bible, Jesus reached out to the oppressed. He reached out to the minorities. As gay and lesbian people, we fit into that group. I've now got a greater sense of compassion, a greater worldview. Essentially, I'm less judgmental. Knowing how hard it is to be particularly a gay Christian, knowing that the church doesn't really accept me, knowing that the gay community doesn't really accept me, that's hard. But then again, that's a choice. Being gay is, I guess, in a weird way, it's a blessing. It's a blessing into, being able to see people, closer to what Jesus saw them. To be able to understand the oppressed, to be able to understand people that, are the outcasts of society, to know a life that hasn't been, exactly easy, and to know the hard road, and to really be able to understand yourself, to be able to understand God, to be able to understand the world.
Well, there's no doubt that some churches don't make gay people particularly welcome, and some particular churches within a denomination don't make them welcome. And there are some people who are comfortable in that exclusionist world. And if that is so, well, what people have got to do, if they wish to pursue a spiritual life, is to have a good look around, because there are definitely churches in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Anglican Church which are welcoming. Most people who are religious, in my experience, are pretty good people. They're people who've thought about the reason why we live, the reason for existence, the reason for living together and reconciliation. I had dinner last night with a group of Anglican clergymen, and one of them made the point that in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the very first feeling of God that is revealed is that God felt for Adam because he was alone. And that is really, as a metaphor or as a poem and of an opening of a spiritual conversation in the Bible, is a wonderful opening, because it teaches that we are not destined to be alone. We are destined as human beings to have our inner being and our consciousness and our conscience, but we're destined to be with others, and that is how it's intended to be. And if you're gay, that means you should have exactly the same entitlements to be with another human being who loves you, who puts up with you, and who tells you where to get off when you go wrong. Well, I don't think everybody likes it, but there are, of course, a lot of people in Anglicanism, as in all of the denominations of Christianity, and in, as I've discovered, in all of the great spiritual traditions of the world, that accept that this is part of the natural variation in society and in the world and in our species, and therefore they accommodate. But of course there are some people who are very conflicted about this. If you have an inerrant view of Bible, of the biblical language, if you think that it is literally God speaking to earth, and if you think that it is to be taken literally, then you've got some problems, and you've got to overcome those problems. The fundamental principle, though, is one that I learned for many years in my own occupation as a lawyer, that words have to be interpreted according to the context. And the context of biblical instruction is a context of a text written a millennia ago, and therefore it has to be understood in the context in which it was written, and has to be seen with fresh eyes as a poetic and symbolic series of commandments to us as to how we should live our lives as spiritual beings. Of course you can reconcile spirituality and religion with human sexual variations. It would be like saying, well, you've got to put redheads outside the messages of Scripture, or you've got to put tall people or short people or blue-eyed people. It's a ridiculous notion, and it cannot be. You cannot have a spiritual message which speaks to the deep needs that human beings have for a spiritual element outside a religious context. And I think that is the essential problem that the Christian churches now have. They've come to a point that they accept that you cannot discriminate against people who are gay or of sexual minorities, but they are preaching a doctrine that such people have to have a completely sexless life, which is completely unnatural. And therefore that cannot be anything more than a staging post on a journey towards acceptance of the fact that some people have a different sexual attraction. And if that is the case, and if that is so in nature, that is how it is intended to be. If you like, that is how God made it, and therefore the churches and religions have to accommodate to that fact.
This film was never an anti-religious project at all. It was a questioning project, a journey, if you will, as indulgent as that sounds. And I experienced various things during the film, and there was a moment of enlightenment when I went to the Metropolitan Community Church in Auckland, in New Zealand. I was invited there when they found out about the project. And I expected something different because this is the gay church. It's the one where you can be gay and be in Christ. So I went to the church, and I had high expectations, and the service started, and I have to say I was let down. It was all the same lions, lambs, light stuff that I just couldn't connect to. So, I went along with it until halfway through they called us up for communion. So I went up and decided to take communion, and I was there with my partner, and we were asked beforehand if we wanted to take communion together. So the priest was coming around and speaking to various people, and then he came to us and put his arms around us and started speaking about how I was welcome, and it was a journey, and I was allowed to ask these questions, and I didn't hear the rest of it because I began to cry. And it wasn't the Hollywood single tear, it was actually quite ugly crying, and I don't know where it came from. I was quite overwhelmed. That's the only way to describe it. I was overwhelmed by something. And it continued. They moved on to the next person, and I went to take my seat, and I was still crying, and my partner was still crying, and I don't know what it was, but something happened.
I did one character, an atheist preacher, with my best deep south accent, and using all the tricks, all the verbal tricks that the preachers use, whispering and then shouting, and the call and the response, and I had a band behind me swelling to a glorious conclusion. And for me, the fascinating thing was watching the audience, because for the first couple of minutes it was, what is she doing? And then, I get what she's doing. Oh, yeah, this is pretty cool. Oh, yeah, hallelujah, sister. Whoa. And then after that, though, once everyone started syncing up, and it changed, and it became incredibly powerful. And within 20 minutes, I had them stirred up to the point where people at the back were going, hallelujah, fuck God. And then when it was over, again, watching the audience, because this is where I get all my enjoyment for performing. I get to watch people's minds as I fuck them and see their reactions. And when I was finished, it was like a couple of minutes later, people were literally shaking their heads and going, what the hell was that? And that I've never come to terms with. And like I say, I don't know if I can ever explain it, but something happens when you get a lot of people together with a similar purpose, and it's spooky. Well, basically, a church tells you if you want to be gay, gays are immoral and perverted and degenerate and filthy, and that's what you're going to become. And I think some people, when they realise they're gay, they go, but I'm not like that. What I'm going to do is stay as good a Christian as I am, and I'm going to get Mr. Gay perfect right for me, and we're going to have a relationship that is as loving and holy and monogamous as any straight person, and then the church will accept us because we'll have proved that we're not like the other filthy, degenerate perverts. When I came out to my religious friends, a very strong theme that came through was, don't worry, Sue, we still love you. You're not like the other ones. You're the exception that proves the rule. And that is actually an expression I want to talk about for a minute, because I think that informs a lot of attitudes in the West. So that when you say, you're the exception that proves the rule, it means you don't have to change your mind about the rest of those people. That stays intact. You've just sliced off one person to go, but you're all right. And so really, if there is an exception, you should go, well, that's not a rule then. Faith mostly is an accident of birth. And then if you do, and I've often said to people, so you're a Catholic? Were your parents Catholic? Yes. Oh, how lucky. What if you'd been born into an Islamic family? What would you have done? Oh no, I would have always been a Catholic. Nonsense. Accident of birth. And then for the seekers, for the people who then move away from whatever religion they were born into, I must say I don't get it. I don't get it. For me, it's all the same con trick. If you see through one, why would you go bother looking at the others? And then it's a matter of choice and convenience and something that fits with your brain without having to make you think too much a lot of the time, I think.
So the Mornington Baptist Church was a fundamentalist Christian church, and they would read the Bible and translate it very literally. So whatever would, you ask questions or whatever, they would just go straight to the Bible and quote it to you. So it was one of those churches full of rehearsed smiles on Sunday morning, and people, and I got to know their lives, and in the background often it wasn't quite, as perfect as they would kind of present at church. And the pastor of the church would quite frequently talk about, in my mind as a little kid, it was almost like the top 10 sin list. And that was, prostitutes and drug addicts and homosexuals. So on these endless Sunday mornings, I'd be sitting there listening to just how evil these mincing predators were, and realising that I am attracted to guys, and then listening to how terrible these people are was absolutely devastating. I was thinking, how could I possibly be one of these monstrous people? I don't feel like I'm anything like that. And yet I am. For me then, the fear of rejection plus the shame of it all meant that I just held it in as this terrible, terrible secret. At that stage then eventually came into my mother, and she sent me to a psychiatrist who gave me what I found out later on to be antipsychotic medication, which at the age of 18, when I had one of those, the gin and tonic, it was fabulous. So, and then I went to Christian counsellors and all sorts of other people. And this Christian counsellor was very much about, he was so terrified of having a live gay man in his room that he would just be talking about his dog and about the baby Jesus, and it was quite odd. So I didn't get much out of that either. And so then whenever I went out to a gay club, I'd be seeing it through the filter of everyone's disordered. So all I could see was the disorder. All I could see was the drug and alcohol abuse. All I could see were people that weren't interested in relationships. So I was in Sydney on the periphery of the gay scene and really feeling uncomfortable about being gay and terrified at the thought that I was gay. And I knew I couldn't be straight, but I didn't want to be gay. So I was kind of caught in between those two things. Now, this is the perfect time, and this is exactly the target market of the ex-gay groups, which are people in exactly the position that I was, deeply conflicted between beliefs about the Christian or fundamentalist Christian and sexual orientation. And so I got this letter in the mail from this guy, and he was the leader of Exodus at that stage, or it was called Restoration Ministries. And I read this letter, and it said, you don't have to live like this anymore. There is hope. You don't have to be gay. I was like, my God, I didn't know you couldn't be. Like, this is the answer to me. It was like my escape from the trauma, from this internal battlefield that was just torturous. So I flew back to Melbourne and went into this group of guys, and I thought, finally, these are the people that understand me. These are other Christian guys and women who are gay or lesbian who don't want to be. There was a underlying psychological theory that supported how you actually change. They spend a lot of time and energy tying in a lot of quotes from the Bible into this neo-Freudian theory, and the quotes from the Bible, as you would know, are that men should not sleep with men in a naughty way. So then I had prayer therapy, and without the person that I was doing the prayer therapy with was not in any way qualified. And I remember there was one time where I said to him, we're doing some prayer therapy thing, and he said something quite outrageous. And I said, hang on, I know you're not meant to say this to your counsellor, but that sounds really off. That's weird. Why did you just say that? He said, don't talk to me. It's the Holy Spirit talking through me. No responsibility taken. The amazing thing about these groups is that it's like having a group of people who are really committed to becoming black, and they all have white skin. So this place was meant to be where you became successful again. You became valid. You became, a valuable person in a way. Every week that went by, I felt more of a failure. There's a terrible thing that occurs when every day you wake up and nothing's changed. So every day you wake up, you're confronted by your sense of failure. And over and over and over again, over a long period of time, this for me was a couple of years, I think, it really does lead to a sense of depression, which is usually about hopelessness and self-downing, that I'm a failure as a person. If I only tried harder, if I only did more prayer therapy, if I only believed more and was more persistent, that it would be okay. And in the group, when other people failed, they call it falling. So someone said, I fell this week. I had sex with a man, and everyone go, okay, well, let's pray for you and work out ways where that won't happen again. And it's okay. It's a bit like a relapse, that people do, this is going to happen, but as long as you just keep persisting, things will change. Exodus exists because a lot of well-meaning Christians, fundamentalist Christians, deeply believe that homosexuality, in inverted commas, is a disorder, is not according to the will of God, and people who actively engage in homosexual behaviour and end up in gay relationships are people that are doomed.
I was accused of cherry-picking from the Bible when I approached people in the film with explicit anti-gay passages from the Bible. They responded with their own pro-gay passages, as they believed it, from the Bible, which I see as cherry-picking also, just from the other side of the fence. This same kind of cherry-picking is evident with right-wing bigots all around the world. They're happy to believe passionately in the anti-gay sections as they see it from the Bible, but the other sections that talk about not eating crustaceans, not being able to enter heaven if your penis is cut off, needing to be put to death if you're adulterous, they won't accept that. And it's a contradiction. If you're going to believe passionately that I should be put to death for lying with another man, then you must believe equally as passionately that everyone you know who's cheated on their partner also needs to be put to death. The thing about interpretation and cherry-picking of the Bible is that you're meant to have a deep personal interpretation of the Bible. You're also meant to have an interpretation based on the society you live in and the time. The problem is the Bible wasn't written in English, it was written in Hebrew. A lot of it is poetic. It's been reinterpreted many, many times. So you can ultimately interpret it to justify any position you want.
There's very few references in the Bible of homosexuality compared to all the other aspects of life. God clearly talks about, lying, stealing, thieving, being honest to yourself, loving others. All those aspects of the Bible that are mentioned hundreds and thousands of times in the Bible. Yet you've got sort of less than a handful, and 4 or 5 scriptures in the whole of the Bible that even mention homosexuality. Yet all those 4 or 5 scriptures can be interpreted other ways. You've got to search your own heart. This is where the individual relationship with God is. You have to search your own heart, and it's up to you to look at that scripture and really maybe do some research for yourself and see where those scriptures fit.
Faith is a personal thing, that even if people accuse you of picking and choosing what you believe, that you have to do that.
History tells us that it's very dangerous to take a particular verse literally without having any understanding of the historical context, the cultural context, or even to look at the original languages of those verses. Like, for many years myself, I looked at those 6 passages in the Bible, Old and New Testament, and I thought they talked about me. I had no understanding that this was talking about temple prostitution, or it was talking about rape, or it was talking about pedestry, an older man using a younger man for his sexual pleasure. So I had no idea about the idolatrous practices that used to go on in that time. I didn't even know that the word homosexual did not appear in English translation of the Bible until 1946. Right, well, there are some people who will take those verses and they will read them in English translation, and through their own cultural lens will then come up with an interpretation. But history tells us how dangerous that is, And we need to be very careful to be able to say, this is the truth. And you have to believe that.
People who think they can take the Bible literally, quite frankly, morons. It is the work of many authors collated over many centuries, and the translations of if you truly, literally want to take every word of the Bible as true, it's insane. People talk about the 10 Commandments. If you actually go and look at Exodus, there's not 10. There's about 3 different versions. You have to fight and find one, and it's all patching together. The Bible is incredibly contradictory. And my favourite story, because I always get accused of taking it out of context. You've taken it out of context. Well, where is context? Show me this mythical place where I can put these stories where they make sense, because they don't. The one that I tripped my mother up with in 2 Kings, there's a prophet going up to a mountain to worship, and some children come out and tease him about being bald. So he turns around and curses the children in the name of God, and a bear comes out of the woods and kills 42 of the children. Now, really? Is teasing a prophet about being bald a death sentence in the Bible? I mean, really? And when I threw this story at my mother, she just looked at me and said, well, we don't know what sort of children they may have been. They may have been satanic children. What I've just said can be completely dismissed because I'm interpreting the Bible wrong. But the trouble is, everyone will be interpreting the Bible wrong unless it's blessed and accorded by whatever knucklehead is in charge of whatever religion you happen to be in. Only they can tell you what it's meant to mean. Well, then what's the point of having a book that everyone can read?
Well, Cafeteria Christians are that group who pick and choose amongst just what they want to believe. Because really, when you look at Christianity, it's actually pretty uncompromising on most levels. So Cafeteria Christians, they often tend to ignore things like original sin or the idea that divorce is not okay. So you find, for example, fundamentalist Christians who are strongly anti-gay, research in the States has shown that they're actually more likely to divorce than others. But they don't see their divorce as being as sinful as 2 men falling in love with each other. So in the past, people would say, well, that's what the church, that's what Islam, that's what Hinduism says, so I must believe it. Now we're much more inclined to question it. And so we go, well, yeah, that bit I like that about love thy neighbour. I don't like the bit about, sacrificing children, or I don't like the bit about never being able to get divorced because it's, God's joined us forever. So people pick and choose the bits and pieces that they like much, much more today than they used to. And by doing that, they actually move further and further away from what their religion really is if they examine the roots of it. And this is the whole rise of the power of the individual in the modern world, where it's about you. And so therefore it's not about what the church tells you, or maybe not even about what your minister tells you, it's about your personal relationship with God. Well, I think when people say that they're spiritual but they're not religious, they're not taking a position, really. They're being inoffensive and they're trying to hedge their bets. Or maybe there is a God, maybe I should be believing, but they're not willing to tie themselves to a particular set of religious dogma and say, this is what I believe in. So I think it's a bit of a cop-out. I think it's a real cop-out, actually. People don't want to be told that they're most likely going to spend eternity in a lake of fire. They want to be told that actually when they die, they'll go through a white light and everything will be wonderful again. It's a nice, happy belief, but it's I think it's intellectually empty and it has no historical or religious basis to it. One of the key things around New Age thought is often you create your reality. And it's a bastardized form of misunderstood Hindu and Buddhist philosophy, really. But what it does centers the individual, and it says, you're rich because you chose to be rich, because this is what you did. And when we look at things like The Secret, that falls into this kind of thing. I would say Amway can also certainly be viewed really as a religion in this way. And they both have this sort of basic thing of believe, ask, receive, and the universe will give it to you. And if the universe doesn't give it to you, you're not asking properly. It's your fault. And it's really nice if you're a comfortable, middle-class, wealthy person, but you try telling that to some starving kid in a developing nation that they just haven't believed in themselves enough, and that's why. It totally eliminates politics, it eliminates class, it eliminates ethnic conflict, it eliminates race, and it just says, well, it's up to you to love the universe and trust the universe. And I think I find it's a particularly vacuous position for people to take, a very smug, self-satisfied one that I really can't support. But so religion always has that level of, here are the very fixed rules, and then people go, and they always have done, They've gone, yeah, I know that, but I'm going to do this anyway. But they've always then gone back in the past, needed to go back to the religion to be cleansed, to be forgiven somehow. Today people seem to think they can cleanse themselves rather than having to go back to a religious authority for that, much more. But people make individual choices too, and this comes, much more strongly today when I was talking about cafeteria Christians. And you could apply it to Hindus as well, or Jews or Muslims easily, where they pick and choose the bits of their religious faith that they like, that make sense to them, and they ignore the awkward bits. So, if you're a gay man and you're a Muslim, you're ignoring some really big awkward bits. The same if you're Jewish, the same if you're Hindu. Yeah, I would categorise faith as being belief with no evidence whatsoever. There is no way you can prove people go to heaven or hell, or people are reincarnated, or there are ghosts, or there is anything behind tarot card readings or astrology. But people have faith, and they believe it because they want to believe it. If somebody has faith, you can't win the argument because they have faith, and you can't argue against something that doesn't exist. Well, it exists for them, but there's no way you can disprove someone's faith.
Anything in the ocean that doesn't have fins is a sin to eat, and you're damned to hell. If you touch a pig, you're damned to hell. I believe that at the point in time when all of these things were written, there were different biases that were in the people's minds. And I believe that in anything that men or people are involved in, there is the interpretation of the person who's writing the scripture or the doctrine or other things. When I reflect on my faith, I don't believe that God made me to be a bad person.
One of the things I've found incredibly challenging about being a fundamentalist Christian and taking everything in the Bible literally is that you would have to select bits that actually were consistent with what you believed, and anything else you would then, because when people would say, what about eating shellfish? What about women wearing hats in church? There's a whole range of these laws that from the Old Testament. And then the answer to that would be something about, there are there's a cultural context there. We're talking about a few thousand years ago. And but when you then apply that cultural context argument with same-sex attraction, we're talking about morality there. We're talking about the will of God. You can't, talking about shellfish is one thing, talking about living outside the will of God is another thing. They're talking about the rules of the land about, not eating shellfish, which were very important back then because, you couldn't eat it, otherwise you'd be dead because of the diseases you get. But same-sex attraction is against the law of God. There are tomes and tomes of, endless rhetoric and academic arguments about theology on either side of the fence in terms of same-sex attraction. And you can quote from the Bible, but then someone else will say, but the original Greek or Hebrew says something else, and you haven't actually taken into account that sentence is, and it goes on and on and on, So it's impossible to say that any interpretation of the Bible isn't strongly influenced by your opinion.
The major religions all have different opinions on sex. The Jews believe it's fine to have gay thoughts, as long as you don't act on them. Buddhists say that laypersons, gay or straight, must renounce the pleasures of the senses in order to be reborn in a higher plane. Hindus say the soul is genderless. You may be partners in this life, mother and daughter in the next life, and owner and pet in the following one. The reality is that religion's belief in homosexuality and sex in general has changed a great deal over the ages, and there's no reason to believe it won't keep doing so.
I used to be, formerly I was an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God. Every weekend I would hop on a plane and I would go and fly somewhere in Australia, preach to the largest congregations, sometimes up to 5,000 people a time. I'd founded Youth Alive, I had my own evangelistic ministry. So all these things were going, married with 2 kids. I did training in evangelism. I would run seminars on evangelism. So, everything was going really, really well for me. It was huge. Yeah, it was really, really... I mean, if you want to call the ministry success level, like, you know, I was up there with the top. And all my closest friends were the executive members, the pastors of the big mega churches, you know, so I was well known. I was very happy because I felt like what I'm doing is important. This is what I'm on earth to do, is to preach and to share God's love with people. So it was wonderful, but of course in the background, I was struggling with this conflict within myself of who I was and who I believed at that stage I should be, which was being straight. I think I was very, very much in denial. I just kept hoping and praying for 22 years after going through ex-gay programs, after going through exorcisms, after doing 2 40-day fasts, after 16 years of marriage and 2 children, every single day believing one day I will not think this way. Imagine living with that thought in the back of your mind that, oh my God, there is this evil demonic force living in me and controlling me, and how condemned, that's grounds for a nervous breakdown. And you know, when people are given those sorts of thoughts or beliefs, that cognitive dissonance can drive them to suicide. I'd fallen in love with a man, and I was forced to face reality, and the reality was 22 years of doing everything possible had actually changed nothing. And up until that point, I was fighting it. From that point, I realised I can't change it. And from that point, I couldn't preach anymore. So I confessed to the National Executive of the Assemblies of God and to my friends, and the leadership at that particular time said, to show that you are truly repentant, you will never get back in the ministry, but to show you're truly repentant, then you need to do a public confession. Because there is a Bible verse that says that teachers will be held of greater account than the average person because they've been teachers of the word. So that day, that has to be the worst day of my life, when I resigned from the ministry. Not only was it horrific for me personally, but also I knew the impact this was going to be having upon my wife, upon my children, upon all the people that had faith in me and believed in me and thought that I was a good person. The night before, I remember that I went for a walk at Terrigal, where we were living, and there's a big skilly and there's a big cliff face, and I seriously was considering that I could not face the next day of that public humiliation. So the next morning, when we got up to go for church, I was like a zombie. In the church that morning, there were about 800 people. Service went through normally, and then at the end, the pastor said, we've got some church business to attend to, so if you're visiting today, you can leave. And then I walked up to the pulpit and I held on to it because I knew if I didn't hold on, I would probably collapse. And I've been told to keep it very brief and also not to mention my homosexuality. So what I did was, I just said, look, I have to confess to you that I've committed the sin of adultery, and I'm resigning from the ministry today, and I've sinned against you, I've sinned against God, my family, and I'm so sorry, and I'm resigning from the ministry today. And then I just lost it. My wife lost it, and people in the congregation lost it. I mean, after this event, I cried for 3 weeks. Every day, I'd wake up crying. I'd fall asleep crying, I'd try and pluck up the courage just to get out of bed and face the day, because I had lost everything, I lost my career, but my purpose, everything I'd worked for had been wiped away. I'd lost everything that I really had valued in life. All I understood was, you are straight, you go to heaven. You're gay, you go to hell. And I knew I couldn't be straight. that period then for 6 years was, I guess, you know, I guess I was discovering who I was and how I would be as a gay man, because, you know, I'd heard all these things, oh, gay men do this and gay men do that, and this is the gay lifestyle, you know. And I thought, oh, well, that's, so I explored that. I was told in the church, this is what it means to be gay. So I think a lot of preachers have a lot to answer for because they've preached about this gay lifestyle. And so when some young gay guy leaves a church because he knows that that there's no other option, well, that he can't turn straight, one of the first things he might do is he might go into the gay scene and begin maybe to have some bad experiences and maybe live in a way he wouldn't live normally if he'd been given another option.
Why is God making gay people?
What's the point?
Well, you could argue that, you know, and I do believe that really the God of the Old Testament is a moral moron and a psychopath. Being gay is not biologically useless. There's way enough kiddies in the world. I've met very few people in the world who are worth repeating. I've met very few people whose genes are that marvellous and that amazing that they need to be continued indefinite. If the church was in the mood to accept that gays and lesbians could teach the church humility, that they have been wrong for most of their history and that their book is wrong. And that's a lesson I think the church can never accept, and that's why they will never really change their attitudes towards gays and lesbians. Because admitting you've been wrong for the entire history of your church is very painful. I really don't want a bar of any organised religion, and I really think the Bible is the most vile, nasty, bloodthirsty book I've ever read, and kiddies should not be exposed to it. I'm Sue Post, I'm a comic, and I used to be a Mormon.
I wanted this documentary to be about many belief systems, but I was soundly criticised for wanting to interview a Raelian. Some people thought Raelians were nutty because they believed in aliens who like to stop on volcanoes and chat with humans about their high-tech plans. But these very same people thought, believing in chatting with burning bushes, Jehovah's Witnesses who believed that only exactly 144,000 people will go to heaven, among many other beliefs, were quite sane, simply because a lot of people believed it. Is there a number of followers required to turn a belief from nutty into an acceptable mass delusion?
When people encounter new ideas, they're often dismissed as being kooky and radical, and you know, it's nutters involved, and that it's a cult or a sect, etc. They tend to forget that all religions started out as cults and sects. Catholicism is nothing more than a successful cult. In 1973, Rael had this overwhelming compulsion on his way to work to visit an extinct volcano in France. He went there, and out of nowhere came a small craft hovering, a spaceship. And from that stepped a little man, he thought a child at first, and that who identified himself as Yahweh. And the great Jehovah. But they created us in their image and after their likeness through scientific processes, genetic engineering, molecular engineering. And they gave us free will. We can do what we like here. But they have visited us many times, and they have sent prophets, one of which was Jesus. Jesus is a prophet. He's the son of Yahweh, as is Rael, is the son of Yahweh. But so are Krishna and Buddha. All these people have been sent by the Elohim to try and get us to get our act together, to be loving. All religions have the message of love. The Raelian position on homosexuality is almost the reverse of other religions, in that we see that until gay, lesbian, transgender, intergender, bisexual people are considered as normal, natural human beings, then there will be no peace on this planet, there will be no equality, there will be none of the fraternity and compassion that other religions pretend that they are striving for. Sexuality is seen in the Raelian movement as one of the great gifts given to human beings, to humanity, and everybody has the privilege but also the right to sexual activity. All forms of non-heterosexual sex between consenting adults is celebrated as one of our ways, our great ways of liberating humanity from the old medieval constructs. Well, gay and lesbian people have been very burnt by religions, literally, at times, over the centuries, and even today. There's horrific incidents that occur by religiously inspired so-called people. So yes, there's a reluctance to be involved in anything, as was I. When I first encountered, I didn't want to belong to any other movements. I had removed myself from groups in so many ways. I grew up as a Catholic, and I was very dedicated and very devout. I was troubled, of course, as a gay person, as most people growing up in these religions are. I was looking for new belief systems or ways of creating my own. I met my first Raelians, and that was, one of those great days when suddenly everything made sense. And it has liberated me beyond my wildest dreams. I'm sure with my mother, that she prays for me daily in regards to me being a Raelian. When you believe in something totally and that it's the way, nothing else gets in the way of that. And the bottom line, of course, is that gay and lesbian people, after all, are people. So it's difficult to speak of gay and lesbian people as just a mass of humanity because that's separate, because they are part of humanity. And the Raelian movement is very much the message that so many gay and lesbian people are craving for, that love that we all want, that we're all looking for. People want to know that they're respected and appreciated and considered as equal.
Paganism really embraces the individual and celebrates the individual and the person who can think and who can find their own connection with God, goddess, with all that is, with whatever you want to call it. Sexuality in spirituality has been around for a very, very long time, and it has been predominantly the organized religions that have made it into something dirty. It at one time was something to be absolutely celebrated. One of the evenings that I was there this weekend, there was an enormous gathering in Tennessee. A few hundred people showed up for this. There's this phenomenal bonfire, about maybe 40, 50 people seated around it, drumming, dancing a little bit, nothing particularly strong. Well, as the evening progressed, the drumming became more intense. Other drummers came and added to it. More drums, more instruments, more voices. People began to dance. There was no song per se. There was no gospel being sung. There was just this incredible atmosphere being created by everybody together there. This fire, it was very primal. It was very natural. It just felt absolutely phenomenal. But people began to disrobe. Not everybody, but just one or two of the dancers. And there was this incredible feeling of liberation. Nobody cared. Nobody was going, ooh, look at that. It was just this incredible feeling of being a part of what was going on, a part of the experience. You feel alive, you feel invigorated, you feel sexual. It wasn't lust, but I would not doubt if that was a part of it. But there was certainly this connected feeling with everybody around you, and it didn't matter if you were gay or straight. Everybody looked equally beautiful. The fervor from the dance and the fire and seeing somebody that you find very attractive dancing near you, we went and made some magic of our own. Within any religion, there are always zealots who try to make or claim that their religion or the view that they are a part of is what they want it to be. I do know that they have spoken out loud and said that because paganism has its beginnings in fertility rites, that it is strictly a fertility religion. And so if you are gay, you have no place in this. We're past that. We celebrate it as a symbolic thing, as a union, as a balanced whole. That feeling, that religious fervor, that incredible rush that you get, whether you be in a church pew, praising God, praising Jesus, and you feel that rush come over you, or whether you be dancing to drums by a fire, there is that distinct, definite feeling of being one with everything.
Being an atheist is the default human condition to me. You're born an atheist. We all are. Being religious is learned behavior. The whole purpose for God and religion in people's lives is it brings something to you. It makes you feel very enlightened and loved and part of something bigger than you, and I never felt any of those things. Religion is unnatural. Organized religion enslaves people. It's part of the tools of theology is to make one feel bad for certain things. Being an atheist makes me feel more enlightened. It makes me feel what religious people would feel as being enlightened when they feel the presence of God, and they feel secure in that, and they feel like they have answers for things. I feel the same thing, just on a very different level. They have no basis for the proof of God, for the existence of God. There's no reality that says, this is God right here, and you can't question that that is absolute God. Or I could simply quote someone who says it best, one of my lifetime heroes, Patti Smith. Jesus died for someone's sins, but not mine.
What we do is we see, as human beings, we see events and we try and construct meaning around them. And so we look for patterns. And religion builds on that and uses that by the way that we do this. So X happens, it must be because of Y, and Y is divinely ordained. But that's how we create these links in our minds and believe them, and we see a divine pattern in what are in fact random events happening in the universe. An example of that could be looking at something like a few years ago there was the apparition of the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast. That's a piece of bread that's been put in the toaster, and by the actions of electricity in that element, it's burnt it in a certain way that if you look at it in a certain light, you can see a vague outline of the Virgin Mary. But people want to believe it, and they see the pattern within it. And all religions have evidence of this sort of thing, whether it's cutting through an eggplant and seeing the name of Allah in the seeds as they form in the circle inside it. We look for these things and we ascribe meaning to what are in fact random natural events.
Well, why do we have life? Why are we here? Why is it likely that I'll be here tomorrow and one day that I will be gone? And what is the reason for that? What is the explanation for it? To be human is to have an intelligence, and to have an intelligence is to have an inbuilt skepticism and inbuilt desire to understand the meaning of all things. And that leads us to seek some greater wisdom and greater space. And it's a very natural thing to seek for spirituality. I'm not saying it's natural necessary to speak for religion. Religion is an institutional solution to the deep feeling human beings have for spirituality, and religion can help you to spirituality. But the essential search for a spiritual part of life and for an explanation for it all is a very natural thing, and it's why it exists. It's very hard to stamp it out. Lenin tried, and he had a bit of success for a while, but there it is all back again. And that's just part of our human nature, to be curious, to be questioning, and to be trying to understand the meaning of it all. Well, I'm sure a lot of religious people just want to have a set of rules and have them very clear and have them strictly enforced because they come from God, and have a few hangings and executions if people stray from it. But that's not my understanding of my religion, and I don't believe it's the essence of the Christian religion, which is a kindly religion of faith, hope and love, and the greatest of them all is love.
What was interesting was, I decided I would commit suicide at 50. Because another thing I'd been told about being gay was that all gay men end up lonely, desperate people. So I thought, well, who wants to live past 50? Because, that'd be terrible. So I planned to commit suicide at 50. What was interesting was I didn't go seeking a relationship with God again, because as I said, we were not on speaking terms. But what happened was I was doing a personal development program. And in this personal development program, as I was going through the course, it was a self-study course, there were all these things in there that were really quite familiar to me. Like they were talking about forgiveness, about sowing and reaping, about positive confession, about faith, all these things. I'm going, I know all this stuff. I used to preach this. And here it is in a personal development program as principles to live by in life. And I guess it was then that I thought, well, maybe I threw the baby out with the bathwater. And these things that were really important to me and I believed in, I can still live them as a gay man. So I'm doing this thing and putting all these things together, and then it comes out on the page, my life purpose. And I'm looking at this and going, God, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And that night, I prayed for the first time in 6 years.
Did it feel a bit rusty?
And I just said, God, I do not understand what this means. But one thing I do know is that I'm okay. I'm gay. This is not an issue with you or with me. And what is much more important is the life I live. And so I'm on speaking terms with you again. And from that point, it was really interesting because I'd had quite a dramatic conversion experience back when I was 18. It was exactly the same. Yeah, so when I was 18, I had quite an amazing conversion experience. It was very dramatic. It was life-changing. That's what conversion is. But when I prayed again to God for the first time in 6 years, it was really, really similar. Like, consciousness changed. The way I felt about myself, about things. All these things started to happen in my life, like come into sync, and lots of coincidences began happening to me. And it was like, we would use the term being born again. Well, it was like I got born again. And I tell you, the strongest thing was that I guess I felt this connection with the divine that I hadn't felt for 6 years.
Faith and spirituality, in a way, I think are, if you go back throughout history, it's always been there. There is something about who we are as a species that, in a way, needs to have a sense of being connected to something much greater than ourselves. My cat, Kiki, has no interest. But for some reason, for people, a sense of happiness is gained through a sense of being connected to something much larger, much more important than who they are. When you look at the way people develop emotionally, psychosocially, sexually, in whatever way, and you look at people who've been brought up from a very early age with a particular religious framework, every day things that happen in their lives are filtered through that. So, something bad happens, Satan did that, or God allowed it, or, something happens where you always have that spiritual filter. Yeah, people always seem to respond well psychologically to having a sense of structure. Without having a sense of structure and goals, for example, or a set of values that in a way guide you in making decisions in life. And that's incredibly important. That's incredibly healthy. It's just who we are. We need that sort of stuff. Or we float kind of, throughout life and wonder what the hell happened. So in terms of having a sense of purpose, having values, goals, all those sorts of things are a really deeply important part of who we are. But when you then put spirituality and overlay it with spirituality, spirituality then provides another layer, in a way, of rules and regulations and guidelines to guide people. Unfortunately, when those rules and guidelines are not consistent with who they are as a person, and those rules and guidelines say that you are evil, you are bad because of how you love, that's wrong. That can't work. And how is that consistent with the idea that God is love? If you look at it from an existentialist perspective, why in the hell are we here on this planet? There's a great sense of comfort that comes when you think, it's fine. Death is not the end. Death is the beginning of a new, you either come back as a donkey or something more fabulous, or you drift into this beautiful sea of light and gorgeousness, well, I think some people think you end up in purgatory, but I think it's some sort of waiting room where they've got lounge music and gin and tonics, and I think that wouldn't be so good. Oh, it might be nice actually, but anyway. So yeah, there is this, for a lot of people I think on an existentialist level, there is a real fear of death and a real fear of nothingness. So yeah, so to close it off, so religion basically is a beautiful framework around comforting us and saying that, look, it's not the end. Your life actually has a lot more purpose and meaning than what you might think. And rather than dying, you have a much better time. You know, you end up... The only problem is that if you read the fine print, you end up with a whole bunch of born-again Christians playing guitar for eternity. I think that's hell.
It's the people out there who go on and think they alone have the entire truth and everyone else is lost. Well, I just don't think we humans are blessed with that type of certitude. And we all can learn from each other, and in a dangerous world we all have to learn from each other. And we can all learn from science, because if it's in science, if it's in our genes, then I'm sorry, but the religions have got to adjust to that truth.
After over 2 years of interviewing people from all around the world, of many different faiths, many different beliefs, it did shift my opinion. In the beginning, I was convinced that you couldn't be gay and formally religious. And now I believe there's a groundswell, there's a change, and I think you can. I truly believe you can. I believe the people who say that you can't are simply wrong. I do believe that. I truly believe that religion provides genuine comfort. Genuine comfort. That's not being patronising. It's a force for good. And that's not excusing the holy horrors that religion has perpetuated over the years. But I truly believe it provides genuine comfort. So I wanted to leave you with this thought. Religion is a label. Homosexuality is a label. And labels lead to intolerance and judgment. What if we could remove the labels? Would this debate even be necessary?